Welcome to Small Business Saturdays video series with your host and my husband.
And my dad, Aaron Montgomery.
Join the conversation.
Let's talk some business.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome into Small Business Saturday. I hope everybody's having a great Saturday. Wendy, I am excited that you've got coffee in hand and ready to start your day with some knowledge. I love it. So let's just get this out of the way first then. Good morning. Cheers. I've got some coffee in my hands. So yeah, we're going to have a great conversation today. We're talking success principles today here. And we're going to be talking about the very first success principle number one, which is take 100% responsibility. Those of you that are regular listeners will know that this is something that I've talked about repeatedly. And it's actually just something that I will continue to talk about repeatedly because it is so important to our success. I've kind of translated it to empower yourself. This is the principle that allows us to just take back the control, just take back our control over everything in our lives and not leave it up to somebody else. Yes, I know the easy way out is to leave it up to somebody else to, blame, point, make excuses, complain, that kind of thing. But the problem with that is that then we are giving away our power to whoever we're blaming. We're giving away our power to whatever we're complaining about. We're giving away our power to anything else except for ourselves. So if we can take 100% responsibility, then we take all of our power back. Yes, it's a little more difficult because that's some pressure, right? But you guys are rock stars, so pressure is no big deal. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're actually going to get into there's a formula that comes along with that. And really the formula is just a way to kind of easily remember how this all works. And that formula is E+R = O. Meaning the event, whatever the thing is that's happening, and we'll have lots of examples here today and that kind of thing. But for example, the event is supplies are short in a lot of distributors' place right now, right? And then so the R, E+R. The R is our response. How do we respond to that, right? We can be angry, we can be pissed off, we can give up, we can just tell the customers, sorry, that's just the way it is. Or the other kinds of responses could be, okay, this is an opportunity to find new vendors. This is an opportunity to get closer to my customers because I need to have more deep conversations with them. This is an opportunity to try new products, et cetera, et cetera. That could be your response, right? And to feel like it's an opportunity. And then that outcome is then what's going to happen when those two things are put together. So you have no control over the event. What you have control over is the R. Anyhow, I don't want to go too deep here because Eric and I are going to talk about that. I'm excited to welcome in Eric. And here's the reason. As you guys know, Eric is a really good friend of mine. And Eric has a massive amount of skills and talents and abilities. He's obviously, most people know him as the embroidery guy, especially when it comes to digitizing. I joke about my 15 minutes of embroidery experience, but I've been around this industry for 22 years. And I do not, in my 22 years of time, I do not know anybody that has been regarded as highly when it comes to digitizing as Eric. And there's a lot of great embroidery people out there. There's a lot of great digitizers out there. But Eric just kind of has taken it to a real art form and goes deep into the fundamentals. Anyhow, we could talk about Eric's accolades all day here. But then he also has a ton of other knowledge, e-commerce in Amazon and all marketing. And so he's just a really great resource. And over the years, Eric and I have found that we will just from time to time, we just end up chatting, right? We just end up going deep. We talk about all sorts of things from, personal to professional to, things like this. And a couple of weeks ago, after one of the half shows, this whole concept of E+R = O came up in one of our conversations. And it was just really interesting and actually refreshing. I've spent a lot of time lately hanging out with my friends that are also Success Principles trainers on the virtual stuff that I'm doing and things like that. And to have somebody that he gets the concept, but he's not entrenched in it, and he's not quoting it all the time, that kind of thing, to get his take on it. And it was just a really awesome take. And so I said, hey, would you mind joining me on Small Business Saturday to talk about this and to bring your perspective to this? And he was willing to do that, even though I did some math earlier. He has spent, let's see, so we had the hour on 2 regular guys yesterday, a little bit more than an hour. Then we had the half hour on the half. And then he and I ended up chatting for another 2 hours afterwards. So he spent a lot of time with me. So he may be tired of me after this, but we'll see. So without further ado, let me bring in my good friend, Erich Campbell. Good morning, sir. Welcome in, and thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. All right. Well, so let's get this started. I kind of gave everybody the basic concept of E+R = O and what the responsibilities are. But let's get into that a little bit deeper. So you heard me kind of giving the example of, okay, supplies are low, what the responses are, but one of the things that I think I've heard or maybe even felt from people as I discuss this is that, okay, if we're going to follow this whole concept of I'm taking 100% responsibility and this E+R = O thing, that the first thing people think is, hey, I need to, just make sure that my responses are all positive, shove those feelings, the thing that happens and I'm pissed about it. And I should just shove those feelings away. What's your take on that, Erich?
Well, I think it's kind of where we started off when we discussed this, is that most of the time when I hear people talking about working with their mindset, when they're talking about trying to develop positive mindset, they take that to mean whenever something happens that they're not going to either feel negatively or they're not going to have that moment of negative reaction. And here's the thing, you can have that reaction, but it's internal. And what I kind of think we should embrace, or at least we should be really honest about, is that there's a step in this E+R = O. Before the R, before the response, when the event happens, the feelings you have, you're going to feel. Like you're going to be mad. You've got a customer who does something that you don't like, or they renege on a deal. You've got a vendor who says they have something, so you sell it to a customer, but then suddenly they don't. The first thing you're going to feel like is, well, crap, I really needed that. I'm going to look bad. Someone's going to hate me after this. And plus, that's the other thing I think we're not being honest about. Part of the reason we react poorly, it's not because we are angry, horrible people. We're angry because we're about to be made to look poor. We're going to have a chance to, disappoint somebody. It's possible that our customer or the person we're serving now doesn't have what they need, so they look bad, and that reflects poorly on us. And then we might get into all sorts of baggage that we have about our self-worth, our value, what it means if we fail, what it means if we can't come through, our word, the way that we promise something. All of this stuff comes up in our heads, and we're like, all right, what ends up happening is you start out with this event that is not the end of the world. I don't have the white t-shirts of the particular brand I ordered.
Yeah.
But then the next stage of this event is, well, obviously now the customer will never trust me again. My life is over. My career is over. No one believes who I am. Mom was right. Dad was right. Uncle was right. Whoever said I was a mess up, a screw up, that's definitely me. And now I have to go and with my hat in my hand and go to the guillotine. And that feeling immediately turns around and we react poorly. Then we take our action, the actual R, we take our actual reaction in the real world, and we do something that isn't really jiving with our values or honestly isn't commensurate with the actual thing that happened.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We should be allowed to have the moment, the space to have those negative feelings. You're going to have the feelings you have. It doesn't mean we then take those feelings out on the world or into the world.
Exactly. I'm posted on social media.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Well, this is oh, sorry.
No, you're fine, Eric. Go ahead.
This is our kind of inside joke where I always tell you guys about what I always called the manifesto. And this is the negative version of the manifesto. Everybody has like the manifesto that is like, oh, this is my personal credo. And that's one thing. But I always call it writing your manifesto. When someone gets upset about something and then their reaction is to write about how everything's messed up, what's wrong in the world, who's wrong, air all their dirty laundry in one go. And I'm like, well, that's the end of that person's, social interactions with everybody. They just wrote their manifesto and decided to put everyone on blast for every little thing that ever bothered them. And that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the reaction wasn't in step with what's actually happening. And if they had taken the pause between E and R to say, all right, what do I really want to have happen? Then they might not have acted like that. They might not have written the scathing manifesto that gets them in hot water.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's so perfect, Eric. I mean, all the things you talked about there. You talked about those. Okay, the event happens, and then we immediately go into all of the what ifs, right? Yeah. And you mentioned that, and that's really, again, those are fears, right? Whatever happened to us, like you said, mom, dad, uncle, whoever said we were going to be a worthless failure at some point. Whatever causes those beliefs inside of us, and then that becomes a fear, right? The customer's going to hate us, my career is over, those are all fears. But anybody that's listened to me before understands what fear is actually an acronym. It's not a word, it's an acronym. And fear stands for fantasized experiences appearing real. So you're making up those beliefs in your head, and you're allowing those beliefs, those fears, to control what your response is. Like you said, then comes the manifesto. So at least, I'm puffing up and I make myself feel better and blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I think what you then said after that is that pause, right? That E+, people forget the plus in the formula. Yeah. And I think that's really it is, I'm not saying that fear is a bad thing. Fear is actually something that's really important for us as humans. It keeps us from, catastrophe. Yeah. And so we need that fear. But what we have to do is we have to then move that fear from subconscious to conscious, so that we can then make a logical, a little bit more conscious decision about, is that actually a real threat, right? And so And it's just a slight pause to say, okay, here's the event, slight pause, fear, something comes up. Okay, that's a notification that maybe I should take a little bit deeper look at this. But just slight pause, right? It's just a moment to say, okay, cool. Now I know, now I can kind of focus this into reality. Here's the potential pitfalls, but let's start looking for potential solutions. And then I think that's where the O becomes really important, right? And so you and I talked about this for a little bit yesterday, and I loved your take on that. So talk to us about your thoughts there about the O, the outcome.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think this is the thing. We work the problem forward whenever we're thinking about this. If you describe it as because this is the thing, like you talked about earlier, that I'm really not steeped in the success principles. So for me, I'm like, okay, I see the equation as a way to understand something else that's already happening, where I think some people think of the equation as prescriptive, like, okay, I'm going to apply the equation, and they work it forward. So they're like, all right, the event happens, and then I'm going to cultivate my response, and then the outcome happens. So they see the outcome as something that's generated by the event. But I think that's entirely wrong. The thing we're solving for, if this is our math problem, right? The thing we're solving for is our response. And what that is, we're going to work back from the outcome. The event happens because we are goal-oriented people who are living to a purpose, who know what we want, who have worked on our plans, who have an idea of where we're going. And that's the assumption. Hey, we all have problems with that. I certainly do. But we're going to assume that we've been doing our homework and we have a goal in mind. That's the O. We're looking at the outcome and saying, all right, well, the outcome of this situation needs to serve the grander outcome or the purpose of what I'm doing. Certainly, if it's, let's say it's the growth of my business. Well, if that's my eventual outcome, whatever I do in this R, in the reaction phase, has to be serving a smaller outcome for this particular event that will then lead toward what I want as a goal. And honestly, there's other outcomes to think about. Invariably, I've had someone tell me, and this is something we talked about too, where they react poorly to someone because they want to teach them a lesson or make sure they understand, or because I'm standing on my principles. And principles are important, but what that phrase often is masking is like, I'm hurt, I want to hurt them back because I want them to feel how I feel, and it doesn't serve the outcome. If you ever convince somebody of something, have you ever compelled somebody to believe differently by telling them they're stupid or wrong? The chances are no. Yelling at someone that they're stupid or wrong doesn't make them feel like they want to listen to you or agree with you. So none of that stuff is teaching anyone anything.
Yeah.
You can try and hurt somebody back, but let's just say this: it's not building customer relationships. It's not growing you as a person. It's not certainly growing your business whatsoever. It's not making you more successful at home. There's nothing that a poor reaction, or honestly, there's nothing that laying down and giving up really helps, unless, of course, we're talking about things like we really have noticed a reaction, or that the event is showing to us that whatever we're doing is not on that path.
Yeah.
But that's still us looking at the outcome going, all right, well, what I need to do here is cut ties with this customer because nothing I do here looks to be heading toward the outcome I really want. But that's a very different place to be coming from than firing a customer because you're ticked off.
Yeah.
Or firing off that email because you're ticked off, or because you're sad, or because whatever has gone on that made you have that initial, kind of reaction, the fear-based fight or flight reaction.
Yeah.
No, you just have to have your outcome in mind. And certainly, like I said, there's the minor outcome, which is what's happening right now on the event. And then there's the larger outcome, which is, what is the purpose of this? What am I working toward? What do I want? What's my next big goal? And how does this all fit together?
Yeah.
It takes a pause. It takes some time.
Yeah,
and cultivation.
It does take that pause there, and I love it. So really, the equation should be E plus and then blank equals O, and like you said, you're solving for the blank, and that blank happens to be what you have control of, which is your response. I love it. So we're gonna make that fix. I don't know how open I've been about this, and not for any other reason than I just haven't really talked about it a lot. But one of my goals for next year is I am going to write my book. And that book is kind of my translation of the success principles into the business world. And so my first chapter is Empower Yourself, which is this whole concept of 100% responsibility. And so, I've kind of been playing with that formula. And so I've just got a new way to describe that. I love it. Thank you, Eric.
I mean, I think it's a natural kind of outgrowth of this concept. If you have control, that's where you can plug something in. I mean, we can't necessarily plug in the outcome. That's the sad truth is we're dealing with other people frequently. Yeah. We can't have any sort of control over what they do, nor do we really we can take responsibility for what we're going to do.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing I'm going to say too. Whenever people talk about 100% responsibility, that's not blame.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between responsibility and blame. Just blaming yourself when, like, we made the joke about the asteroid hitting, like that's the event. If that's, if it's something that's just, it's an act of God, it's nature, it's something that you couldn't possibly have control, then obviously we're not saying, okay, you're definitely responsible for the asteroid. That's you. No, it's that when it does hit, when the thing does happen, when the, whatever the event is that happens, it's that you have 100% responsibility for how you decide to move forward.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, certainly under the restrictions of the real world around you, for sure, you're not going to say, well, my reaction is to fly away like Superman. Yeah. Well, no, you're not going to do that. But you can certainly decide how you're going to meet those circumstances, and I think that's the thing. But we have a chance to do that. That's where we get to plug in our part of the variable.
Correct. And I think that's really important to note too. Because this can be a little bit of a like, it's scary to think, okay, I have 100% responsibility for my life and outcomes. Holy cow, that's a lot. And so I've actually heard people in the different trainings and stuff that have happened kind of challenge Jack on this whole concept, right? Like, oh, well, so what do you tell somebody that got cancer? That's their responsibility. And or the kid that was abused when they were young, how do they have any responsibility for that? And exactly like you said there, it's not about going back. It's not about going backwards. Totally. I mean, that they had no control over those events, those things. What this is all about is what's their future, right? They can stay in that place in what are you going to do about whatever the situation is. And it's been proven over and over again that the people that can be focused on what the present and then what's happening right now and what they can control, they are going to have better outcomes, right? People do recover from cancer. They've got all these things that like outside of science, even sometimes these, I couldn't believe this kind of thing. But again, I'm not saying that And so just what you were talking about there, Eric, is really key to think about there. It has nothing to do with, we're not solving for E. We're not trying to put,
No.
how do we change E? It has nothing to do with changing the event.
Can't change it.
It has everything to do with, like you said, solving for R. I think the other thing to put in here, Eric, and I'd love to get your feedback on this is,
Sure.
When we talk about kind of solving for R, we go, okay, well, what happens if we screw up the R? What happens if, we do let that fear take over and we do fire off that, negative email or whatever.
Yeah.
What's happening is all these R's are going to be a sum total, right?
Sure.
You talked about, what the bigger outcome is versus, what just kind of is happening in the moment and what it's closer you'd like to get. And I think that's the other important thing to understand is that that bigger outcome is just kind of a sum of all the R's. So as long as you find a way to make most of your R's heading in the right direction, a few where you didn't quite get it right, or you learn something after the fact. I believe that we all do. How do I best phrase this? I believe that we all do exactly what we have the ability and knowledge and experience to do in that moment. Even people that have done, what society would consider very negative things, they're just operating with what they have as their ability at that time. I'm not saying that gives people license to just be jerks and stuff like that. What I'm saying is, if we're worried about, again, trying to control somebody else and saying, oh, well, they're just whatever, then we're taking away from ourselves and our ability to empower ourselves and whatnot. So I guess I've kind of gone a long way around here, Eric, but where are you at on that? Right. Like now I'm really nervous that I am going to make a mistake and have the wrong R and my outcome's going to be bad.
Well, the first thing to come up with on this is one of my favorite phrases, just failure is not fatal. Failure is not fatal until we stop trying again.
Yeah.
Can you irreparably damage a business relationship? Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us aren't going to do that if we're being conscious. And if it does happen, well, the truth of the matter is that's the new E. The new event is that we no longer have that business relationship, and how are we going to react to get to our actual outcome we want? And the thing is, we do have to think of a greater overarching outcome, because if the outcome is get that customer back, that's not really in your control. You can try, you can do the best thing you can to make things right, or to work on that relationship if that's what's important to you. But we can't control that. So we also have to not only forgive that, but we have to give that up a little bit. We have to give up someone else's reactions and do what we think is the best thing for ourselves. And honestly, this is where we ended up kind of at the end of our part of our discussion yesterday on this, the pre-show before the show, was that there's a certain amount of legacy. And I will sometimes, funny enough, despite being the person who everybody says, oh, he smiles all the time, he's so positive, I will actually kind of explore some of the negative, or at least the darker aspects of this. I'm like, all right, well, let's say sum total, I'm going to the end of my life and I have the epitaph on my tombstone. What kind of person overall would I have liked to have been as part of that as part of that outcome? I think that's fair to say. The legacy you're leaving behind as a human being on the earth, on other people, is part of that. I mean, that's part of what your reaction, your outcome should be, I think. Yeah. And honestly, we were looking at business and success and what we're doing while we're here, not just, memento mori, what are we doing after we're gone, or what is that? Of course, I know we're not always going to be here, but in our greater outcomes, we do have to think about that. And here's the other thing. Let's talk about other people's reactions or what they do. Yes, we can decide that they're doing their best, but here's the thing. Even if we don't think they're doing their best, number one, we can't control it.
Yeah.
Number two, wouldn't we feel better, act better, do things that are more aligned with our beliefs if we just take the most charitable version of what they say? And I've written on this several times. There's a philosophical principle that is used when you're debating and arguing things with people. I mean argument, not like fighting. I mean argument like discussing a topic, like making arguments and debating. Called the principle of charity. And what this is when you're facing somebody else and you're disagreeing over something and discussing it, you don't just go, that person's crazy, they're off their rocker, they don't know anything, they're stupid, they're mean, they're violent, they're awful. No, you stop and go, all right, I don't agree with what they're saying, But for this person, I'm going to assume, whether I believe it or not, whether I have any reason to know, I'm
Yeah.
going to assume that the version of what they're saying makes sense to them, that they think it's right, that they
Yep.
think it's morally good, and that for them, they think it's the right choice to be making right now. And my argument is going to be aimed at the best version, the best interpretation of their argument. And it gives back their humanity to some degree. And honestly, if we start dealing with people like people instead of dealing with people like idiots, jerks, whatever it is that we want to do to other these people and make them not us,
Yeah.
we're going to react better. We're going to address things more logically. And even if it's an emotional topic or something that bothers us, we can come back to them and say, this is really why I feel how I feel. I assume that you're saying this stuff because you really do think it's going to produce a good result, or you feel like you have to. And you don't have to say that to somebody, because honestly, they're going to react poorly if you say,
Yeah.
I think that you erroneously believe this is good. That's not what we want to do. But in reacting that way, we're going to be truer to ourselves. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if they're malicious, because we're not going to worry about what their motivations are. We're going to deal with the reality of the situation and present our best version. And especially, you're talking about business, you're talking about success. There's a point to this where it doesn't really matter if the other person is genuine or not, or acting above the board or not. We have to act aligned with our own principles, and we have to do what we need to do to get toward our outcome and our goal. And ultimately, like I said, the other big O, the big outcome on top of all of this is, who do you want to have been? How would you like to characterize your activities on planet Earth, or just in this particular interaction? Would I want to look back on this later and cringe, or would I want to look back on it and go, I did the best thing I could with what I had? And the other half of this, when you were talking about us having this kind of overall, the overall result being a conglomeration of all the different things we do, the other thing that came to mind immediately for me is, as a garment decorator who did a bunch of stuff for department stores and really large contracts at one point, spoilage rates. We assume as decorators that we're going to wreck 3% of anything we do in the first place. And we that's part of the contract. We should understand, hey, we're human. We're probably going to mess up, 3 out of 100. And that's a really nice estimation of how many times we're going to mess up our choices. And that's okay. Like, that's to be expected and planned for.
Yeah.
I mean, to be expected, to be understood, and then learned from, not like if you keep on making a mistake and you find out it's endemic, like you're doing it all the time and it's the same mistake, that's a thing to correct. If you make an honest mistake once in a while, sometimes it's not even something to correct. It's just like, the glitch in the system, my ability to process that stuff, or the fact I couldn't stop my tongue before the immediate reaction, the emotional part of me took over.
Yeah.
That's going to happen once in a while, and we're just going to have to reboot and try again. That's just how it is. We're going to have to, that shirt probably isn't going in the box.
Yeah.
We're not going to send that one along if we can help it. Let's make a few extras so we don't,
Yeah.
so we don't have that problem. But spoilage is going to happen.
Exactly. And I think it's awesome that you brought up the point that, that is then planned for, right? That is part of the, part of the overall. And so, so this kind of leads in, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, and I want to come back and hit a couple of other things on this whole E+R = O. But, we've talked about this ultimate O, right? This kind of bigger picture part of this. And so really what we're trying to do is have those, what's the goal? You mentioned, what would be said at my funeral or something like that.
Sure.
Because as kind of, I don't know how people would kind of react to this. One of the things that maybe we want to do in our business, for ourselves personally or whatever, is just kind of, write your own epitaph, whatever. And then, so that kind of gives you, hey, this is how I want to end up. And so do the R's that I choose get me, is that going to affect that end result? And so having that focus, having that goal, and then, putting it into a business context. How do you want your business to be seen to the world? Right. It's one thing to say, I have great customer service. It's another thing to actually live that, and to have policies in place, and to understand what people are seeing from the outside looking in. Right. because you can say that you have great customer service all day, but if you take everything personally, you get upset when somebody calls you out, you're whine about your customers all the time. Most other people aren't going to go, yeah, they've got great customer service, right? So just kind of looking at it at a lot of different angles. So real quick
Sure.
on that, Eric, before we kind of reverse a little bit and hit a couple of other points here.
Yeah, no, I think that as much as I did the epitaph thing, I made it, I'll say this, I amplified that up so that I was trying to get everybody's attention. Like,
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is this is also your Google review. And I mean, that's funny
Yeah.
to put an epitaph and like, equate it to a Google review.
Yeah, sure.
But it's the flavor of your business. It's the overall character, the tone of your actions, of your business, of whatever you're doing, and I mean, it's in all spheres of life. I mean, we can talk about business because we act like business is not part of life.
Yeah.
The way we live is the way we transact, is the way we work, is our creative output. It's the same thing. It is one continuum. We can put it in little boxes and say there's different strategies, and that's fine. But ultimately, E+R equals O is whatever you're doing, because you're looking for an outcome. Otherwise you wouldn't take an action. Events happen to you, whether you choose for them to happen to you or not.
Yeah.
And we are going to have to react or not react in some fashion. And that's still a choice to be made. And I think when we're talking about, business and customers and things like that, yeah, you're right. It's easy to say I have great customer service, but I know people who are saying that more like, I really feel put out by customers, so therefore I must be working really hard for them. And I'm like, that's not quite the same thing you just said. Like, that's not exactly what you mean there. Complaining a lot because customers inconvenience you is not the same as being customer focused. That's not the same thing. And and as per the usual, I'll give you the dark version, the light version. It's what I've told people before. Whenever they say, okay, I need to punish someone, I need to teach them something, I got to teach them a lesson, they're stepping on my toes, and I'm not going to back down. And I always look at it and go, all right, well, your outcome on this one, let's say, here's the dark version. You're saying to me that your customers are stupid jerks. And I'm like, okay, well, the outcome is that you would like their money. Well, you better learn how to talk to stupid jerks, because if you want the money from the stupid jerks, you're going to have to talk stupid jerk language so you can get their money. Yeah. That's the nasty version of it. And I don't like the nasty version, but when you're talking nasty, sometimes I feel like that's what people want. And I'm saying, but the real thing is, like the principle of charity, if I go, all right, I don't know what kind of day this person's had. I don't know if their uncle, father, mother, cousin told them they were screw ups. And so when you screw up their order and now they feel like they're going to go to the family reunion without the shirt that they needed for, grandma, whoever, and look like a jerk because they didn't make sure to take care of it, or they went to the wrong shop and got the wrong t-shirt, you don't know what kind of baggage they're bringing to their reaction. I mean, their R is also coming from all the baggage, is also coming from their life experience, is also full of fears and things that they're protecting themselves from. We don't even know what we're reacting to. So it's more, I think it just makes a lot more sense for us to look at our outcome as the driver for how we want to react, not the event, because the event happened. It's done, and we're just going to have to deal with the repercussions of the event. And especially when that event has to do with a person, and it often does, we don't really know all their motivations. The best thing we can do is say, here's the kind of outcome I want. Here's the kind of person I wanted to be. Here's also, honestly, the kind of color and flavor I want to, having dealt with my company. That's where my R should come from. It doesn't even really come from the event, aside from the event gives us the problem that we have to solve. If you think about like design thinking, designers are solving a problem when they create a creative solution. They're looking at a problem going, what am I going to do to solve that problem? I can see that someone has a problem. I want to ease that pain. I want to remove that friction. And that's what we're doing. The event is whatever it is. We need to ameliorate that problem. We need to work on that problem and make people feel better, or give people a path through it. But the tone of our reaction and the way that we handle it really should still be driven by our ultimate outcome. We're going to say, all right, what would the person do that I want to be in this case? Like if there is some Superman businessman, this is somebody who's doing this the right way. There's some superwoman who absolutely has their stuff together and is going to react in the way that I think is best. How can I be that person on the way through this? And also, but with that caveat that we're going to mess up sometimes, we're not always going to know the right solution. We might flounder, we might flop around. But if we're acting in tune with that desire to be that person, to also achieve those outcomes, I think you can't argue that you're not going to have by and large, as an overall character, a better set of reactions.
Yeah, totally.
Or at least reactions that we can live with. Hey, let's put it this way. Even if it doesn't come out, even if the person we're dealing with, they choose violence that day, today they're not going to, they're not controlling their reaction.
Yeah.
We still want to say, all right, I did my best. I gave it my best shot. I treated everybody like a human being. I did the thing that I would think is correct if someone called me to task over it.
Yeah.
And I did the thing that I thought was proper for business, and I didn't react poorly, and I didn't, make fuss. Does it mean we're not going to feel negative? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're totally, I think, honestly, if it's Eric Campbell's show on this thing, I would say, hey, I'm going to give you permission. Do it. Not that you need my permission, but if you need someone's permission to blame for having had a negative thought before you did the right thing, go ahead and tell them I said it was fine. I don't know.
Yeah. You can put both our names on that. That works.
Yeah. You're going to have your initial feeling.
Yeah.
And that reaction, the initial reaction inside of you is yours, and you own it, and it's up to you. And also you're the only one really experiencing it.
Yeah.
So it's totally fine. Plus you can't, the lizard brain part of you that is protecting you from fire and predators is still going to fire off that first warning shot inside you and say, absolutely, I got to protect you from this.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's that we're not living with predators and fire anymore. That's not how we're living. Yeah. We need to react to what's really out there. For sure. And we also need to react with that outcome in mind.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you said, just let that reaction come in, and it's, don't push it away or, look down on it or whatever. Yeah. Like you said, that's just human nature. That's who you are. That comes from your experiences, and our experiences make us who we are. And everybody listening to this is an awesome person. So, and that comes from their experiences. So it's okay to let that come in, but then again, you have to get it switched up to your conscious brain and go, okay, let me analyze that, right? Is that just my, like you said, lizard brain protecting me from whatever, the fire predators, or, is it a real threat that I need to kind of take a little bit longer to come up with the right R in this situation? Sure. So, and then the other thing that you talked about there, I love that how you did such a great job of, I was kind of going off task and you brought us back to the E+R = O. I love that. But the other thing that you mentioned in there that I want to make sure that we really highlight is this concept of that. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how you explained it, but immediately what came to mind, because again, I'm always involved in the success principles. And one of the principles is act as if, right? And you were talking about the people that maybe you see out there that you want to emulate and that kind of thing. And I think that's definitely a good thing. And so we need to be thinking about that, how this, wherever I'm headed, whatever my epitaph's going to be, how would that person react to that? And then start acting as if, because I think you and I were talking about this yesterday, this whole idea of context does matter, and switching and being appropriate inside of the context of whatever that situation is. I don't think that that's a negative thing. I think some people look at that and go, oh, I'm just not being true to myself if I act this way. No, you act that way in that circumstance because that's what's appropriate for the circumstance. And, as long as you're not, to me, as long as you're not pushing up against a core value, like, okay, if your core value is this thing that, okay, well then don't put yourself in those situations where, whatever your core value isn't necessarily going to be appropriate to the context of the situation. But at the same time, I think that, I don't know if you want to share your example. I'll share an example of mine, but we talk differently when we're talking to different people. And the comfort level, what people are, you don't want to encourage kind of going to the negative, but if it's just a couple of guy buddies hanging out, there's probably going to be a couple of swear words, right? But if I'm talking to my grandmother, I'm probably not going to be using a lot of swear words, right? So just those things, and that doesn't make me a shifty, whatever flip-floppy type person. It's like I'm reading the context. I know what my core values are. My core values are okay with a couple of swear words every now and again. But, I also want to be appropriate to the people that I'm around. So that's my response, right? I'm choosing my response. So anyhow, I know that we talked about that a little bit, but I'd love to hear your additional thoughts on that.
Oh, no, I think it's absolutely proper to realize that you're not being fake if you decide to, not react immediately from your gut.
Yeah.
It's not fake. We all code switch. And this is the other nice version of it. Because I'll go ahead and throw myself under the bus. I'm the one who told Aaron that's my thing. Because in my kind of local area and the friend group I had when growing up, we cursed a lot. And I don't do that in business situations, but if you catch me sometimes at dinner after a show, you probably catch a couple of curse words, because if I'm comfortable, I that's just I kind of grew up with a lot of that, and so occasionally I'll drop a couple bombs. But here's the thing: I wouldn't go into a meeting with the president and start dropping F-bombs. That's not going to happen, because I am at a place where the rarefied air says that's not a good idea and that it's not the right way to go. Am I being fake? No, I'm being polite in the presence of someone whose office is important or what have you. I mean, and that maybe isn't the best option, because maybe your core value is that you don't truck with that, or politicians or whatever. Fine, but then I also would say, you know what? If you think that you should never cut back what you're going to say, politics probably not your forte, probably something you don't want to go into, because that situation is going to require you to code switch and to do different things than you do at home than you do when you're on the campaign trail. These are just things that are true. And honestly, I think it's sometimes when people are saying like, oh, you're going to let people get away with X, whatever reaction someone else has. And I'm like, no, I'm not letting someone else get away with something. I'm choosing that the kind of person I want to be isn't going to chew people out for their failings or faults. And it doesn't matter what they do. I'm acting according to what I think is right to do in this situation, and according to what I think will get me to my goal. That's what I'm doing. And that's not mercenary, because your goal could be, philanthropic. You could have an awesome goal and realize that sometimes this awesome goal means that I don't just go right to the teeth of the person who I'm looking for help from, because I want to make sure I can, give away what I need to for, unhomed people this season. Maybe I have to play a little ball somewhere, or talk to somebody who I don't like on an immediate basis to make sure I have what I need to do what I need to for my goal. That's not fake. That is a professional choice you make to speak that way in order to grease the gears. That is fine. We all do little social things to grease the gears. We say pleases and thank yous, and it doesn't mean that we're, ultimately grateful to the end of time for someone opening a door. It means that that's just part of what we do to get through the social interactions. It's okay to round off the sharp corners when it makes sense. And also, it's okay when we're in a place where we're really comfortable with people and everyone has kind of entered the social contract that we're going to talk about difficult things, to talk about these things. Exactly. But it's not all the same place. We've all had this experience as customers where someone on the other side of the counter starts sharing their life story and everything they've ever gone through, and we're like super uncomfortable. We don't know somebody well, and they haven't read the room. We don't want to be that in any way, shape, or form, whether that's unloading on somebody emotionally, or whether that's, like I said, sometimes someone will go too close with someone too quickly. We know that there are social situations like that. It doesn't make you fake. It just means that you understand the difference between the different places. And I still don't think that, like I said earlier, that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything to some degree. I still think that's fair, because it's okay to say there's a context. And hey, let's make it a simpler thing. When we're eating pizza at like a street, vendor, and we're getting it out of a window, we fold it up, we eat it with our hands, we wipe off with a towelette, and we get it all over our face. You wouldn't sit down to dinner and do that. You wouldn't pick up your other food with your hands and smash into your face. I mean, if you're at a carnival and you're eating something off a stick and you get messy and you're wiping up with a moist towelette and you look like junk, we all know that we're at the carnival eating crappy food, and that's what we're there to do. We don't then go to state dinner and, jab everything on the end of our knife and start eating it off a stick. Like we know the difference between these situations, and that's okay. We just don't kind of extend that anywhere else. It's okay to have like what I always call business neutral. It's this kind of place where we come to things. We start from a fairly, neutral affect that's neutral but positive. We're not immediately reactive. We come to things with a little smile on our face, and we say hi, and we intend for every interaction to be good. And then we work from there and deal with what we have to do. Will you ever have to say something stern to someone? Very likely, yes. I know I have. But even then, it wasn't yelling, freaking out, cursing, questioning their parentage, any of the things that you might do if you're in a bar fight. It's not what we do
Yeah.
behind the counter. And it's
Yeah.
also, I'll be honest, the other thing is this goes into our taking responsibility. Playing the blame game, or saying, and this is something I consulted with clients about this, with businesses about this, blaming another department inside of your own business for something that's wrong to a customer makes the company look bad. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you're a good person as, like, say, a salesperson, or that you're a good person as the owner and you just have a crappy employee. It means that you chose bad employees too. They think it's your responsibility whether you do or not.
Yeah.
The company is the company. It's a monolith from the outside.
Yeah.
And also, I hate to tell you this, to some degree, it's your suppliers too. Eventually, if you keep blaming your suppliers all the time,
Yeah.
the customer is going to go, why can't you get another supplier? Why don't you know how to handle this? And at the very least, they'll say, they will probably wonder why you don't have some kind of option to offer, aside from just complaining, because it just doesn't make them look bad and you look good. It means ultimately you're ineffectual either way.
Correct.
And so it's worthwhile to try and look for another solution, even though I understand these solutions are hard to come by.
Yeah.
Having them and offering them makes you someone who has a solution, who's trying to help. Letting the buck stop somewhere else doesn't help the overall look. And I mean, I've lived through that in other times when we had different kinds of either sourcing or production problems, and watched that kind of implode on people. We're in a different situation now where the world has more going on. No lie.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, no matter what it is, internal blaming, or blaming your tools, blaming your suppliers, blaming whatever, there is an end to that. It can be a temporary thing to say, this is why there's been a hiccup, but it can't be your only answer.
Yeah.
And end well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I 100% agree with that. It is about, like, it's fine to help people understand what the situation is and educate. But like you said, you can't just leave it at that. You have to turn into that solution oriented person and say, okay, well, here's the why. Yeah. And this is where, I'd like to see some of our distributors start thinking this way too. But we've got to do this for ourselves in our own business, right? Okay. We know the challenge with, everybody's seen the picture of the boats out there, and blah, blah, blah. And we hear it on the news, and, even the government's got like a new task force for this. Right. And so everybody gets the challenge, but okay, great. That's the reality of what's happening right now. But here's the end goal that the customer wants to get to. So how do we talk about what the solutions are? And maybe you don't have a solution right away, but if you share with them that you're interested in finding a solution together, that shows them that they have the ability to, that you have the ability to help them. So just lost Eric. I'm sure he'll come back in just a moment. But so yeah, that's I'm glad that Eric brought that up, because all this does circle back around. I know you guys are probably going, where are we going with this? We've been all over the place, but really at the end of the day, this does circle back around. And part of that are you a solution oriented person, or again, are we looking just to place blame over somewhere else? And so taking 100% responsibility means that we work with our customers, with our vendors, with our partners to find solutions. So we'll see if we get Eric back here in a second. But we've kind of covered a lot of the things that I wanted to cover. So probably actually a decent time to start wrapping this up here. Again, we just wanted to talk about this whole concept and reframe that formula. And I love the way Eric reframed it, where we're solving for R, right? And part of that there he is. Part of that is, so Eric, I'm talking about back where we were at the formula when we're solving for R here.
Yeah, sure.
So part of being able to solve for R is that we do have to have that eye on the end result or that outcome a little bit, but that sometimes does take some reframing. That sometimes takes some getting, the lizard brain makes that reaction. And then if we stay like focused in on that situation, we're going to have a hard time seeing, you can't see the forest for the trees situation, right? So we need to then take a little bit higher view of the event and kind of step back from it, so we can see the forest and where we're trying to go, as opposed to all of these challenges in front of us. So let's just close up on that thought real quick, Eric. I think that we've really had a great journey here today, and so I think this is a great place to kind of close on.
I think that when we're talking about personal development or business development, and I know you're a great, a great fan and proponent of the business plan and things like that, I think that that's where the work we have to do to be prepared for this happens. We have to actually have an idea about our outcome. It doesn't mean we're never going to change this outcome. It doesn't mean we're never going to change our goals. Once you start, like we always say, no plan, no battle plan survives meeting the enemy. You're going to have to change what your goals are. You're going to have to change your plans, but having a thought about what that outcome is going to be is going to help be a North Star for us, is going to help be a guiding principle for us when we have to make these decisions. We have to decide what our reaction is going to be. So certainly we have to have that broader view. Are you going to be able to do that immediately in every situation? Are you going to constantly be stopping and analyzing? No. Do you want to be paralyzed by this? No. We should have it as just something that's in the back of our head kind of all the time.
Yeah.
We should have something that is a guiding kind of principle in our head all the time, so that when these decisions come up, we immediately have the kind of color and flavor of that decision, that outcome, that desired, like you said, the kind of desired person we want to be, the kind of business we want to run in our minds. And certainly focusing too deeply on one little section of it sometimes can be problematic. But when we have an event that comes up that's difficult, like the difficulties we've discussed, it doesn't mean those difficulties are going to go away. It doesn't mean you might not still have a poor outcome from someone else or a poor reaction. What it means is we're going to act in our best interest to get that outcome that we want and to be the kind of people we want to be along the way. And certainly, like I said, this doesn't mean that the reality of the thing necessarily changes, but even if that outcome was coming, this is kind of something I said yesterday where I was once again talking about the darker version of things sometimes. Let's say that the outcome is still going to be bad. Let's say that no matter what happens, and I mean bad for a given decision we wanted to make. Like, let's say that we're not going to retrieve the customer, and it's not going to happen. They're going to be unhappy. They don't like what's happened, and we cannot stop them. And we don't know that, but let's assume that's really what's going to happen. Along the way, would we rather have been someone who gave up, blamed everyone else but ourselves, didn't come up with anything, didn't have anything to say, but guess them's the breaks? Or do we want to say, here's what I did. I told them the real situation. I said, I'm sorry that was the way that things were currently working out. I gave them the best options I had at the time. And even if those options aren't great, we can delay your order. We can get different garments that are like this. I can produce patches for you to decorate your own stuff. Like, we went through a set of different answers to their question that maybe it's not what they were looking for, but we had some other options for them. And then even if we know that something bad's coming or they're not happy, we wish them well, tell them our best opportunity we can give them without, cutting our own throats or ending our business over it. Would we rather not have been those people along the way? And honestly, won't the overarching outcome be better if those are the kind of people we were, if that's the kind of business we ran? And when they talk about it, they won't at least say, that person was a jerk and just shut me down. They'll be like, yeah, they told me a bunch of stuff that I didn't really want. That is a lot better response in the end, and more likely to have someone either recommend you or say to someone else, yeah, they told me all this other stuff and they had all these different things that they could do, but it wasn't my shirts I wanted. The other person still gets to decide if they want to work with you. That is up to them, and you can't change that. But I think all day, every day, it would have been better to give an even, balanced response that is coming from your best self, that is guided by principles, than it is to give a response that's out of your gut or to let things kind of blow around the winds of change.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, because to me, in the way you described that there, that outcome is, I feel comfortable with how I represented myself. Like you said, there's potential that, we didn't just burn down the whole forest, right? We maybe had to cut down a tree to get it out of our way, and that's okay. And these things happen. And like I said, but you went from, explaining, helping the customer understand what the reality of things are, and then switched into, let's try to find a solution together. And you get to the point where, there is no common solution here. I still love you, Mr. Customer. Hopefully you still love me, and we'll just go our separate ways here. Right. And so that, again, like you says, creates an outcome that maybe they're going to share with a friend. You don't know what their responses are going to be to things. And honestly, I don't think you should really care. I mean,
No,
not like a,
not in
blow
a
it off
negative way,
kind of
but yeah,
scenario, but just like, I can't control that. So why am I wasting my energy on that? Let me focus my energy on continuing to solve for R
yeah,
in the
yeah.
best way that I know how, and then kind of understanding. Because the other thing that we talked about yesterday, I know said we're going to close up, but there was one other point that we talked about yesterday that I
Mhm.
think leads in here nicely, is the other it's not about, like, we talk about the outcome, and the
Sure.
outcome isn't necessarily this like end point, this like finish
No,
line
no.
necessarily. The outcome is just a target that we're heading towards. And you hear this in sports a lot and all that kind of stuff, but you have to kind of fall in love with the process. It's about that
Yes.
journey,
Yeah.
not about the end result specifically. But we can't take a journey if we don't know what the end result is, right? If you're just taking a random walk in the forest, there's a good chance you're going to get lost. If you're trying to get to the other side of the forest and then you're on to the next part of your journey, that's fine. So anyhow, that was like
Yeah.
that last piece there. So I will allow you, Eric. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, please share your thoughts on that, and then we definitely will close after this. So
Oh no, I think it's a fair thing to talk about because too frequently we look at those goals and we think when we hit the goal, we'll be done. I'm like, no, when we hit the goal, we'll have achieved the goal.
yeah,
That's it. That's not the end of our lives until we stop kicking, until we're on the other side of the dirt. We still have something we're going to be doing that day. We need to choose what that is. Hey, yes, there's retirement in the future, but the thing is, retirement or not working in your business doesn't mean that events won't happen that you won't be reacting to with the desire to have a certain outcome that is best for your life. That's going to keep happening. And also, I'll say, business or otherwise, not only do you have to fall in love with the process, you have to forgive the chance that it's not going to always be the outcome that you want,
yeah,
and also not throw away the good outcomes you achieve, the actual things that are there, because they don't look like the original goal you set out.
yeah,
There is, if you make 90% of your goal happen, it doesn't mean it was a bad goal or a bad day. You did something, you achieved something. Maybe, if you set out to make $1 million and you made 900,000, I would expect us all not to go burn the 900,000. It's just because the goal isn't fully realized at
yeah,
every interaction doesn't mean that we aren't getting towards something better or working in line with our principles. And like I said, ultimately, even if, and nobody wants to talk about this, we're talking about success. So I'll be this kind of guy who talks about the dark half of this thing. Even if we didn't succeed in the way we expected to, I would consider having worked the process in a way that we can, sleep at night and doing the best we could as part of the success. I mean, part of
yeah,
the success is being the person you want to be along the way. And certainly, you can shift your goal and work on something different. You can also find out that your original goal was not really very feasible and didn't make sense.
yeah,
And you can find that along the way. That can happen.
yeah,
Um, the truth of the matter is, as you said, we have to walk in some direction.
yeah,
So why not walk in the direction toward a life that we imagine is wonderful,
yeah,
toward being a person that we feel like is purposeful and is the kind of person we want to be. Walk toward that goal and make alterations in course as we go, and also realize that the work of this thing is never over. The mistakes are still going to happen. You're still going to have to process things. You're still going to have to work on your reaction.
yeah,
And no matter how many years of experience you have in it, 3% spoilage is still going to come for you. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to react poorly, and you're going to work on that. I mean, that's it. You're
yeah,
right. It's being in love with the process and understanding that you're going to be realigning yourself with your purpose on a daily basis.
yeah,
That's just
totally.
how it is. That's what it is to be human. And honestly, this is the other thing I wanted to mention. We were talking about the alarms. I said the lizard brain protecting you from fire and predators.
Yeah,
The truth of the matter is, it's kind of like we're driving an old car that has a broken engine light. The light comes on for stuff that's not real.
yeah,
The alarm bells go off for stuff that isn't dangerous anymore.
yeah,
And we have to understand that, yeah, the car is still going to roll. We're still rolling forward. It
yeah,
feels like we're having this emergency, but the emergency, the alarm bells, the trouble light isn't always telling us the truth.
yeah,
And that's what we're working toward, getting past that and saying, all right, but I know which direction I'm headed.
yeah,
And I know that I'm not actually going to have that. The fire is not really coming.
yeah,
So I'm going to align myself with my purpose, take the larger view of this thing, and work toward the best version of myself and the best version of my business as I can along the way.
totally. No, I think that wraps it up very nicely, Eric. And I think that's a perfect way to kind of look at this. And here's what I love about this conversation, Eric, is we went, I don't know, it depends on how you want to conceptualize this, but we went super woo at certain times, and we went into some different areas. And at the end of the day, this does all wrap back into our business, right? It's that journey, and it's about understanding our part in that, getting back to, again, solving for R. And when we talk about events, again, this isn't always the, major thing that's happening. An event is just an event. Eric said this to me, and a feeling came up inside of me that, maybe I was offended, or maybe, or maybe I felt really proud, right? Those are all those are little events, and, then choosing my response. And so the same thing happens inside of our business here, is that it's about kind of just taking control, empowering ourselves, taking that control back, and understanding that at the end of the day, if we're focused on an outcome and the journey, no matter what happens, right? You could go bankrupt and broke, but at the end of the day, nobody can take away any of those experiences, that learning, that process, all of that is yours to keep for the rest of your life. And so for me, I want to try to keep as many of those things as I can, that help me reach that goal, those positive outcomes, and then, learn from the ones that didn't go my way. And at the end of the day, I think if we all look at it that way, I think we all win. I think we all get to our idea of success. Businesses may fail here and there, but again, your experiences can never be taken away from you. So, I can't remember the exact number, Eric, but I read something like most of the really successful people, the Bezoses and they all had, 6 or 7 failures. That none of us. I mean, you go back and read about Bill Gates and the first few things that he did, massive failures, and pretty much ran him broke. And so until Microsoft came along, right? So.
It's not that you have to go broke, but here's the honest truth. Whenever I look at these bad things that can happen, and by the way, I have been through 2 companies where I was an employee, but I was working with them and doing as best I could, and rode them out as they failed. As the people in charge of those companies made some bad choices, I've walked right through it. I've worked my best way, and kept things afloat as best I can while they failed. It happens, and it's awful when it does. But here's the thing: do you think that I then didn't have to get up the next morning and still solve for the R? If I go bankrupt tomorrow, I'm going to have to eat the day after that, and I'm going to have to figure out where that meal's coming from. It sounds negative, but it also means if I go broke tomorrow, as long as I'm breathing and I can get back up again, I have a chance to make a reaction. I have a chance to say something, do something aligned with what I want to happen in my life, and to be that best version of me again and try again. Like I said, until you're on the other side of life, until you are done, you are going to be making another choice. Number one, you will be making a choice, whether you think you are or not. And you have a chance to make that a choice that you can live with and that trucks with your purpose. And also, I'll be honest, as a digitizer, but I mean, you gave me a lot of lovely accolades bringing me in earlier. And I don't know how many of those I deserve, but I'll say this: I have absolutely failed. And at almost everything that I have tried at some point, have I been pretty good? Yeah, I got up to speed really quickly as a digitizer. I lucked out that just happened to jive with the way my brain works. But when I've tried new techniques, I have absolutely failed. I have ruined garments over and over again. This is what I say to everybody. I was talking about digitizing in my show yesterday on Take Up. And one of the things I said about learning, I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and once again, I'll be the patron saint of lost embroiderers and ruined garments. I've probably ruined more garments in 20 years than anybody starting can imagine. It is part of what you're going to do, but every one of those things, failure is always educational. I hate to say that, even when it happens to you against your will, which I have been through, having someone else who's making decisions that you have to live with, even when it happens around you, it is educational. And that failure, never fatal until you don't try again. That is still your set to try. Now, don't get me wrong. Horrible turns of fate can happen. These things can happen. Most of the things we're usually discussing when we say this stuff aren't those level. aren't that
Correct.
level of fate, aren't that
Yeah.
level of catastrophe.
Because you could, you could win that $1 million contract today,
Yeah.
and yet you still have to then figure out the next R, right? So
Yeah.
it goes both ways.
Yeah, the process is always there, and on top of
Yeah.
it, you may find, and I'll be honest and say I've achieved goals that I thought, once I achieve this goal, I'm gonna feel awesome. Everything will be great. And I get to the other side of that goal, and you have that little sneaking hollow feeling where you go, oh wait, this too, even though it is great, is a step in the process, and I'm still gonna have to get up tomorrow and make the same choices that align
Yeah.
with my purpose and keep doing the work. The
Yep.
work didn't stop, the process didn't stop. This is not the end goal, and then suddenly I ride off into the sunset. Like I said, until you're done, you're not done. And that's good. But that means that we should, I think, engineer our lives and our businesses to the point where the process is what we want it to be, or at the very least that we find value in it and are acting out of our purpose and can continue on in that process,
Yeah.
regardless of the regardless of the events that are happening, that we're going to continue in that process no matter what we do. And honestly, to some degree, regardless of the actual mechanics of the outcome. Like I said, we can change our minds on things. There was a period of time where I was absolutely going to digitize until I died.
Yeah.
And that would be my primary job forever. And I have since moved into more education and helping with software development and all this other stuff that I never imagined, and I couldn't have imagined in the first few years of my career.
Yeah.
I didn't even have the framework to understand it.
Yep.
I would not have. I mean, I didn't start educating until quite a ways after. And also, I've had people ask me about that. You're like, oh, you're teaching at the shows and all this stuff, and how does this all happen? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, 10-year overnight success. I was blogging since 2006. It doesn't always happen quickly, and even when it does happen, you can't always imagine what the final goal will be or what life will look like.
Sure.
And what that outcome could be for you until
Yep.
you get there. Sometimes that process is the only thing you have to hold on to.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for us to look at the small goals, look at the larger goals, and then as we're working, understand that there's going to be little roadblocks we're going to have to go over or around, and that's just part of the process.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Erich, thank you so much. This has been
thank you for having me on.
fantastic. I've loved every second of it. I know that we've done this, but you and I could do this forever. So now we're at, let's see,
We're just chatting.
Put another hour. So yeah, 4.5, 5. We're about 5 hours over the last 2 days, Erich. So I love it. This has been great.
Hey, what do I was gonna say? Like, where this aligns with our purpose, right?
That's right.
Having
Really
more people live these authentic lives and have their businesses be successful and do what they feel like they should do and get successful. That's our purpose. So
that's right.
Of course we're going for it. I mean, and that's
Yep.
Sometimes
Living your greatness zone, baby. I love it.
It feels better and it's easier to do. Funny enough, once you actually are working toward the goals with the purpose in mind. It's running downhill. It doesn't mean the work's not hard, but there's just something that just feels different, just hits different, people.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. Well, Erich, again, thank you so much for your time today, man. It's been great. Looking forward to continuing these conversations. And
all the time.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great rest of your Saturday. I appreciate you giving me an hour or more of your time here today.
Thank you for having me, sir.
All right, Erich. Oops, there we go. I love it. All right. So I really appreciate you guys spending that time with us. Hopefully got a lot out of that. I know I got a lot out of it. So, hey, I'm calling it a win. And I know you guys got a lot out of it too. Just such a great opportunity to kind of hear this from a different perspective. You guys have heard me over and over again about this, and I love the new perspectives that Erich brings to all this and helping us break it down. Because again, at the end of the day, people might say, how does this have anything to do with business? I thought this was Small Business Saturdays. Why aren't you telling me how to do this marketing tactic? Well, because if you don't have this part right, none of that stuff's going to matter. None of that stuff's going to work. You have to have the mindset right. You have to have that plan. You have to understand who your ideal customers are. We talked about customer service inside of that conversation today. And to me, customer service, again, has nothing to do with bending over backwards for every single person that walks in your door. That's not what makes somebody a good customer service company. What makes somebody a good customer service company is setting very clear expectations, working with the people that match their values and sharing those values. And then, trying to find winning solutions, working towards solutions. We talked about that a lot today as well. So it it just is so cool to have that opportunity to have somebody like Erich join us and talk about that too. So, in fact, Wendy says, Aaron is working on me to celebrate the successes. That feels part of his purpose. That is part of my purpose, Wendy. And I very much appreciate you allowing me to participate in that and fulfill my purpose. So speaking of that, Wendy, I owe you an email, and that will happen today. And you owe me something else too. So just a reminder there. Wendy is doing amazing things with her business, and I'm so proud to call her a friend. All right, you guys. Well, we had a great conversation with Erich today, a little bit longer than the 30 minutes normal, but that's what you get with Erich and I. And I love it, every second of it. Tons of great value there. I would like to, if you will allow me, to just share one more thing with you. Part of this whole process of being responsible for ourselves. And we talked about, those fears and those things that were installing us, uncles saying that we were going to be a failure, that kind of thing. So part of that process of being able to have better R's or R's that are going to serve our outcomes that we want more is to release those blocks. And so if you'll go to oursuccessgroup.com/unlock, you will see in there that there are some workshops. In fact, we have 5 planned over the next 5 months. We're trying to do about 1 a month. And in fact, we'll get March's date set and added into the mix as well. 60-minute workshop opportunity to just explore those things and get rid of those limiting beliefs and remove the blocks that are keeping us from finding the right R's and maybe kind of hopefully bring down that lizard brain a little bit, right? Or we let that go some. So I just highly encourage everybody to check it out. It's not a huge investment. It just needs 60 minutes of your time. And then you will get all of the tools that you need to do this in your own time too, after the fact. So it's not just a one and done and you come back. You're certainly always welcome back to as many as you'd like to show up at, but we're going to give you the tools that you can do this on your own after the fact. So to have some people signed up. We've got one happening next Thursday at PM. Right now, we don't have enough to make that happen. So it's tentatively being canceled. So if you're interested in it at all, please make sure that you sign up soon. That way we don't cancel it on you. But yeah, we're going to have to make that decision probably early to mid next week, whether or not we're going to continue with it, because right now we don't have enough people signed up. So oursuccessgroup.com/unlock and get signed up for any of those dates or times that work for you, especially this upcoming Thursday, the 21st. So all right, everybody, that is what we had for you today. Again, thanks so much to Erich for his time. It's been amazing. Thank you guys for tuning in. Great to see everybody. Chuck, thanks for tuning in. Sandy, glad you caught some of it. Kylene, appreciate your feedback and insight into this. And Wendy, go celebrate those successes. All right. Awesome, everybody. Have a great rest of your Saturday, and I will talk to you soon.